Okay. All right. Let's talk about the economic systems. Um, and so essentially, an economic system is how will we as a society decide what is produced and what is consumed? So basically, and then who produces it and who consumes it. So how much do we produce? And then who gets the things that are produced? Who consumes those things? All right. And so essentially, we are going to go over two different systems. We have capitalism and socialism, which theoretically is what the West is using in the Cold War, the U.S. and its allies, capitalism, and then the Soviet Union and its allies, socialism. Okay, and so I looked at many, not many, but I looked through YouTube to be like, all right, what are the what are the big videos, history videos on YouTube talking about these different types of systems, and it was one of the most just disappointing experiences of my life. I couldn't believe how terrible the videos were. Even like kind of high quality videos or supposedly high quality videos like Crash Course History video. Its video on capitalism is awful. Like it barely does a definition. Um, and then kind of just goes into a bit of like history in the 19th century instead of like talking about a definition or thinking about the different drawbacks or something like that. It was just terrible. And then there was this other video that was had millions of views, was talking about capitalism, socialism. Its definition of capitalism was the game Monopoly, which Monopoly is nothing like capitalism. It's like it's antithetical. It's so many things in the game Monopoly are not like capitalism at all. I mean, you have lots of involuntary exchange where you're forced to pay somebody money, which in the heart of capitalism is voluntary exchange. And then the game is called Monopoly, which is a market failure, the opposite of capitalism, which again at its heart is competition. Anyways, so we will go with the standard economics definition of capitalism, not what you might find out there. And there's also within the history profession, there is this group of this kind of new group of historians called the New Historians of Capitalism. They also love to define this in any way. They defined mercantilism, which is an entirely different economic system, as war capitalism. Okay, which is again, you're just taking a word and using it for something that it's not. It's absolutely frustrating. And so this may be one of the most misused terms in the English language currently. I mean, it is almost detached from what it actually is. I mean, now many people just use it to mean oppression or something like that. But let's look at what the word actually means within the context of economics. And maybe, we'll switch up the word to, like I said, I may use it interchangeably with market economy, which is a less charged word. Okay, and so basically the characteristics of capitalism. You have an economic system. Again, it's essentially designed to set up who will produce things and who will consume things. And so the tenets of it are private property. So things are privately owned. There's a market where this private property is exchanged. In that market, there's free entry and free exit. So if you want to be a consumer, you can enter that market. And if you don't want to be a consumer, you can exit it. Again, voluntary exchange. If you want to be a producer, you can enter the market. If you don't want to be a producer, you can exit. So again, and typically production is organized in the form of firms. So the firms will be the ones who produce things, and then these firms can enter markets or exit. Basically, you can start a business and you can go out of business. You can easily do both. So it's at its heart, it should be easy to start a business, easy to enter the market. And if you lose money or for whatever reason you want to exit, you should be exit. You should be able to exit the market, or the firms should exit. They should not be propped up in any way. Okay, and so basically that is the system. A useful framework. Stole this from the core econ book. The useful framework would be, you can think of these things building on each other. So private property, things are privately owned, goods and services are privately owned. So, land is privately owned, whatever. Shirts are privately owned, food is privately owned. If you just have that, essentially you have family-based production. You can think of like farming, where the farming is done by the family. The family owns what they produce. There's no lord, or in like serfdom or something like that, or feudalism, the lord will come take it away. or even in the present, in many developing countries, they don't even have this. Many developing countries do not have strong private property where the elites, the local elites, can come expropriate the farmers. This happens a lot in many poor countries. And one of the reasons why their farming is poor in this country is because if you're a farmer who knows that the local elite, the local political elites, oftenly will come and take your crop, there's no incentive to grow more than what would be for you and your family. There's no incentive to become a great farmer or really increase your yields if you know it's going to get taken away. So this is a big problem in the developing world where they don't have strong private property. Okay, well, we start with strong private property. That is one of the tenets of capitalism. Things are privately owned, and that property is secure. So you need rule of law to have it. We're going to build markets on top of that. And so if you produce excess, like more food than for your family, you can go and sell that at the market. And then you can buy other things you might need, like a roof for your house or more tools or something like that. So we're going to have private property and the market to exchange that private property. So I can go sell my private property. And then lastly, if we add on top of that firms, organizations that can start and die quickly, so they can begin and end quickly, and they will also participate in these markets, producing goods and services. Okay, and then ultimately the household can also sell their labor to the firms. They can go work at the firms. All right, and so basically these different institutions, private property combined with markets and firms, will give you capitalism. Okay, and so if we think back to one of the themes in the class, the institutions you need for each of these aspects, you need the strong property rights, you need contract enforcement to get that private property. You need a functioning legal system, basically. You need a rule of law. All right, so you need that to have the private property. So a lot of countries that may be characterized as capitalism are not actually capitalistic because they don't really have, even like those poor countries, they don't really have this first piece. Okay, next we need markets. The characteristics of markets is they are voluntary. So you do not need to buy something if you don't want to. You do not need to sell something if you don't want to. The firms should be easy to enter these markets and easy to exit them. Okay, so what this means is my competitors should not be able to keep me out of the market. And if I am inefficient, I should go out of business. The government should not prop me up. So we need, if I'm good, I should be able to enter this business. If I'm bad, I should be able to exit, right, in terms of producing. Okay, and then also there's competition. So we need competition between firms and lots of buyers, lots of sellers. Okay, this is how markets should work. So we need access to the market for both buyers and sellers. And then we need, again, that contract enforcement in order for these markets to work. All right, and lastly, we need the firms, okay? And so these are essentially an organization that uses inputs to produce outputs, and then they set their prices they usually if there's lots of competition, they don't have control over the prices, but generally they will operate as long as the market price covers their production costs. And what kind of makes firms different than other organizations and families and governments is anybody can start them. So anybody can begin one. It's like I can't really just start a government if I want to start a government, like in my house, but I could start a firm out of my house. Then they can grow, but they also can die. So they can end. And essentially the firm is motivated by profit. So what we need here usually is some sort of banking system where I can have capital. I need private property and rewards and risks. So if my company is efficient, if I have some new innovation, if I have some good product, in order for me to be incentivized to start the firm, I need to be rewarded. So I need to make money. But also I need skin in the game. So if I'm bad at it, in order for the market to function, firms that are inefficient need to be able to go out of business. Okay, so they cannot be like a government bailout is not capitalism. Okay, a government bailout is essentially, socialized risk. Okay, so that is our definition. All right, basically, private property with markets and firms would be capitalism. People producing for the market, firms producing for the market, free entry, free exit, voluntary exchange. Okay, now, what drives me absolutely crazy is, as I mentioned in the beginning, is how capitalism is characterized out there in the world. So it is not corporatism. So favoritism shown to companies is not capitalism. Remember, capitalism is just open entry, just voluntary exchange. Any company can start, any company can end. If some company receives special benefits, that's not cap. I mean, that's not anywhere in this. That's not it. That's not capitalism. That's what we call corporatism. Monopolies. So oftentimes when people are complaining about capitalism or they're complaining about a company, that what they're complaining about is a monopoly. If you hate the cable company, if you dislike the cable company, that's not capitalism. They have a monopoly on that industry. If you hate a specific airline, again, it's not usually not capitalism, because airlines have somewhat of a government granted monopoly. Many of the problems people associate with Amazon is because Amazon has a monopoly in multiple different industries. And so that, remember, there's free entry. So oftentimes the way a monopoly gets a monopoly is, or back to markets, it's free entry. Way a monopoly gets a monopoly is they are able to keep their competitors out. So there's not easy entry, there's not easy exit, there's no competition. In many ways, that's a perversion of capitalism. That's a market failure. Any sort of market power, actually cronyism, where there's a lack of competition between the firms, is not capitalism. All right, and this often happens through regulatory capture, where companies are able to essentially use the government to keep their competitors out. We see this in the pharmaceutical industry, where essentially the Byzantine regulations involved with producing pharmaceuticals makes it so it's virtually impossible to start a pharmaceutical company, and the incumbents are essentially using that regulation to keep their opponents out. With real estate developers as well. So real estate is also fabulously complicated in terms of the zoning, in terms of all the different regulation, all the different hoops you need to jump through to build new real estate. And so what happens is it's hard, it's hard to build. And so the people that build are basically the people who are best at navigating that, knowing who to bribe, not who to bribe, but actually in some cases bribe. It happened in LA recently. Knowing who to bribe, knowing the right judge to talk to, knowing the right city council member to talk to get your project approved, instead of who is the best builder. So usually it's the person who's best at navigating the regulations and the government, not the best builder. And so all these different things that people usually think of as capitalism, the big bad corporation, that's a monopoly, or the corporation getting favors from the government, or the corporations colluding against the consumer, or these industries, the pharmaceutical industry, where they've essentially been able to block competition, or real estate, where they've also been able to block competition. This is all not capitalism. There's no competition here. At the heart of capitalism is competition and voluntary exchange. Let's think about what capitalism is, though. It is selfish. So it is, buyers are motivated by trying to get the best deal, and the sellers are motivated by profit. So the people involved, the two parties, the consumers and the producers, are both motivated by their self-interest. Okay. So capitalism is selfish. Now, it should be noted that human beings are selfish. So it's not, selfishness or self-interest can exist in other economic systems. This is kind of something that is endemic to humans. Technically, it does reward the sellers who are motivated by profit and the buyers who are motivated by low prices. Now, what's interesting about this, though, is it almost forces sellers. The way it works is it forces sellers, in order to be competitive, the seller has to think about the buyer. So they are motivated by profit, but oftentimes they have to think about the buyer. They have to think about what do buyers want. And so it almost forces them to think about other people in terms of delivering what they might want, or through advertising, convincing them that they want what they are selling. It is amoral. So it's an economic system. There's no morality in it. It's just, here's how we decide who produces what. Essentially, whoever wants to produce it can produce it. Here's how we decide who can consume it. Whoever wants to pay the price or has the ability to pay the price gets to buy the goods. So it doesn't have any morality. Most economic systems do not have any built-in morality. It is also unequal. So again, competition is at its core. We have a bunch of different firms competing. Whatever firm is the most efficient or the most innovative will get the highest profit. And so that firm will have more resources or more profit, more wealth than other firms. It is also unequal in terms of who gets to buy things, because essentially there's a price mechanism. So there's a market price. When we go to the market, there's a price for certain goods or services. If you can't pay the price, you don't get it. So it is unequal. the firms that are more efficient will be wealthier than the firms that are not. The people that run the firms that are more efficient will be wealthier than the people who are not. Basically, the people who are good at competition will succeed, just like an athletic competition. You know, it is an athletic competition at its core is unequal. There will be a winner, there will be a loser. It is destabilizing. So since it rewards innovation, there's a lot of churn. In many ways, capitalism is bad for the economic elite. So if you're an economic elite today, there's no guarantee you will be an economic elite tomorrow. Somebody may come put you out of business. You know, if you're Kodak in the 1980s, things look good for you. You're a Kodak, you're a film company, you're making cameras. The digital camera comes along, and guess what? You were out of business. So it's destabilizing in that way. At any time, your company may go under if a competitor comes up with a better way to do what you're doing. And so you do get a lot of what's called creative destruction. You do get a lot of people going out of business. Okay, that is capitalism, at least defined in economics. Again, you will find all sorts of crazy definitions out there in the mainstream. And most prominently, I think people think of monopoly or corporatism as capitalism. And at least by this definition, it is not. It has competition and voluntary exchange at its core. All right, break before socialism.